thank you to David Wright, and also to everybody else at Artsmill, David Linden and Dorothy, and people who've made this possible. And to Pete and Biff, who helped Mick put the work up here yesterday, which was great. So, what's going to happen now is Mick's going to read from his book. Let me hold it up and show people. We've been self-publishers since the 1980s, and this is our latest thing. It's my publishing company. I've published Mick's memoir, From Earache to Eternity. It's £7, and it's a wonderful tale of 80s and 90s, 70s, 80s and 90s life. And it actually starts in the 50s, doesn't it really? Actually, it starts in the 40s when he was born. But he's going to read a bit out now about when he was in men's groups. When was that, the late 80s?
No, mid-70s.
Oh, mid-70s, right, okay. So, Mick Kid.
Okay. I'd like to pay tribute to my publisher here before I start reading. This is basically set in the mid-70s when I used to live in London. I'd just moved to London a year or so before, and it was a time when men were forming men's groups to support feminism, but being guilty at the same time, so it's about that. And I've got bifocal glasses, so whether I can read it doesn't matter. Right, it's called Of Mice and Men's Groups. Midway through 1974, I changed my first name permanently from Mike to Mick. I was Mick at school, but Mike in Swansea. Mick in Scilly, but Mike in Brighton. In London, I've been both. In 1974, I briefly became Cosmic too, partly to reflect my starry-eyed outlook, but mainly to distinguish myself from another Mick, who looked like Mick Jagger and was known as Lipsnick. Lipsnick was a friend of a left-wing acting group called Red Ladder, whom I briefly lived with that winter. I first met Red Ladder via Les Davidoff, who lived in the same street as me and had heard that I was a writer. Les was an aspiring playwright, working occasionally with another aspiring playwright, Mel Wibley. Meanwhile, he was doing a teaching certificate plus acting and living with Red Ladder, an agitprop group that performed theatre in the street and workplaces, using ladders and top hats to denote class inequality and the crisis of late capitalism. Sorry, I'm losing my voice a bit. Some of its members lived down the other end of Yerby Road, sharing work and leisure, plus each other in some cases. Breaking down the nuclear relationship was high on the agenda, if not as important as opening the workers' eyes. I'm having problems with my glasses. Living at our end of Yerby had become increasingly uncomfortable, with the landlady downstairs constantly devising new ways to evict. At one point, she accused Jane of deliberately desecrating her bedroom wall, to which our lawyer from the Islington Law Centre replied, whilst not claiming to be any great shakes as an artist, our client denies that the painting of her walls is anything less than satisfactory. We decided to go our separate ways. By serendipity, there was a small box room available to move into in the Red Ladder house. I say the Red Ladder house, it was actually owned by Peter Jukes, a left-wing comrade who had been part of the poster workshop, knocking out radical images and slogans for the Soissons Tweetards. As the landlord, he let them stay there on the peppercorn rent, but now he wanted them out. So, One Yerby Road was a short-lived affair. I'd barely moved in before I had to move out again. Les and I ended up squatting together in Worcester Street, which in fact looks incredibly like Headland Bridge, cobbled street place. A horseshoe-shaped cobbled street later featuring Terence Davis's film Still Lives in Distant Voices. And it had Arsenal football ground in one direction, Highbury Fields in the other, and Edgar Broughton bashing out, demons out, from an open window halfway in between. We acquired the squat by the very middle-class method of receiving keys to the house from a mutual friend called Penny, who at the time was having a relationship with one of the Red Ladder actors. She got the key by someone in social services who was annoyed that properties were left unnecessarily empty. As this was the exact line the Holloway Housing Aid was pushing, it seemed fitting that I benefit. In retrospect, it was probably the right-on equivalent of insider trading. In 1974, squatting also provided street credibility, although the term hadn't yet been thought up. Our co-squatters were Irene and Moran, with Les and Moran forming a couple. We each had our own room. Mine was an attic with a non-red ladder leading to it. I used to lie on the bed in the daytime listening to Jackson Browne on the tape recorder with the breeze from the skylight window brushing my face. At night I lay on the bed and watched the glow stars. Owned by the Greater London Council, Worcester Street was a mixture of council tenants and squatters. Realising that the council tenants probably regarded them as drug-taking hippie scum, most of the squatters made every effort to be friendly, helpful and quiet, apart from one bloke who had Hendrix hair and played loud music late at night. Down the street were Chris and Pat and Sheila. Sheila was part of the Women's Arts Alliance, Chris was into Buddhism, and Pat was into staying up all night, induced by taking speed. Our doorbell often rang around midnight. It would be Pat saying, "I can't stand the silence. Is there any chance of some mung bean soup?" Around this time, Les and I became part of the N5 men's group. We attended a large gathering of men at John Hoyland's house in Tufnell Park. As was the way back then, we took turns to say who we were and why we were there. Sexual politics was the backdrop, ditto left-wing politics. At one point, an American called Lou was explaining how he had broken his leg in a Midwest farming accident at age 12. He tried not to cry, as that was a sissy thing to do, but now he wanted a world where it was okay to express pain and feelings. This sounded okay to me, but Charlie from Red Ladder took issue with the tale. "You're full of shit, man. This guy's a CIA stooge." It seemed unlikely that even in President Nixon's paranoid worldview, the White House would bother sending operatives to infiltrate a group of non-sexist men in Tufnell Park. But post-Angry Brigade, the left was suspicious of anyone who might be an agent provocateur, posing as a sensitive Jude. Unfortunately, this rather negated the act of opening up to other men. And in the end, Lou never reappeared. We divided into small groups, each group taking in turn to meet in our respective houses. Ours met monthly to discuss topics like jealousy, non-penetrative sex, becoming non-macho, the pornographic imagination, or whether it was patronising to offer support to women by running creches. We were sincerely dedicated to mending our chauvinistic ways. Dan and Clive tried to become new men. Arié was determined not to oppress his wife. So was John, though he admitted to wanting to beat the shit out of her lover. I had no wife to oppress, but remember being very careful during masturbatory fantasies, always to ensure that the woman achieved an orgasm. In 1974, we attended the National Men's Conference in Leeds, travelling up the M1 in a double-decker fun bus on hire from Interaction. I booked it on behalf of the various North London men's groups. The idea was to collect the money en route. Some men objected, however, on the grounds that Interaction was a hip capitalist outfit. I countered that they were oppressing me as a man by putting me on the spot. They told me to line up and take a toke on the joint that was passing around. Eventually they paid up and we arrived in Leeds. On arrival at the university, we were free to cherry pick whatever seminar or workshop took our fancy. A buffet and dance was scheduled for the Saturday evening, to which local women and gay groups were invited. Unfortunately, word got out around the area that there was to be a dance at the university, so that by 10 o'clock the dance floor was a mixture of non-sexist, straight and gay men, feminists, transvestites, plus guys from the pub on the pub. The result was an embarrassment to the conference organisers, especially since non-sexist men had reverted to old school Mick Jagger strutting when the Stones' Brown Sugar blasted out from the speakers. We were acting in a sexist manner and condoning racist lyrics to boot. The following day's schedules were abandoned and an emergency plenary was called to examine what had gone wrong. It was acknowledged that the gap between theory and practice had yet to be bridged. So that's one bit of it. And I then just finished one bit. Which is also to do with men against sexism.